Cian Tracey, rugby correspondent with the Irish Independent, is with us. The Aviva unfinished and not a great atmosphere seems to be what the rest of the world thinks about us. Cian, I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, I listened to the lads chat last night. I think when the Aviva is full and there's a big team in town, which is obviously not all the time, it's unbelievable. I think like the atmosphere for the All Blacks game last November was genuinely one of the best, and I think you'd say the same about the last time they played. But yeah, no, I'd agree. I think there's a huge problem.
The point about that is it's November, where it's not the same ticketing as the Six Nations, which seem to be kind of block tickets that have gone to, there's just, I always find the makeup of the crowd for Six Nations game is different from November International.
Yeah, do you mean by the pricing or who gets them?
I mean, it seems to be easier to get tickets for November, that they're not distributed through the traditional channels.
Yeah, maybe. I suppose I'm lucky that I'm not having to kind of scramble around for tickets, that I just waltz into the press box. But I've always thought there was an issue at the Aviva Stadium for like taking your seats late, like the anthems could be playing and people are still streaming in. In saying that, I think football's a little bit different, because I've been at the last few Ireland games at the Aviva and they've been absolutely incredible atmospheres. Think back to the Portugal game and things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think it depends. I definitely wouldn't think that the Aviva is this like cauldron, atmosphere. I was in the Stade de France a couple of weeks ago, and that's another level altogether. So yeah, I don't think teams would be fearful of the hostile atmosphere or anything like that.
And yes, our record there is amazing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Declan Lynch was referring to our kind of like love for sawn-off stadiums in this country. People must come to Croke Park and to the Aviva Stadium and be like, what the hell's going on there? Like, what's the story?
There's also a huge issue with like people getting points, which I've no issue people getting points, but like honestly, like if you like at the Portugal match and stuff, like if you dip out, the queues for the bars like during the game are incredible. I know the Principality Stadium in Cardiff have addressed this. I don't think you can get a point now anymore after half time to encourage people to sit in their seats. But what happens if
and stop puking on children?
Exactly, yeah. But what happens if you're 6 or 7 points deep in at that stage and you go to the jacks? It's still this up and down things, and I think that's very frustrating for the people who were there, like not for the day out as such, but genuinely to watch the game.
Match,
and
yeah.
I think that impacts the atmosphere too.
Too many day trippers at the Aviva is definitely a problem. Look, let's talk about you've done a very interesting experiment. You've picked your team for the game at the weekend, and you've picked Andy Farrell's team, and there's a significant difference. I mean, the most significant difference is at number 10. Your instinct at the moment seems to be that Johnny Sexton starts.
No, yeah, well, that would
for
be...
For Andy Farrell's team.
I'm sure Andy Farrell would be delighted that I've picked his team and I've picked my team as well, as if I know better. But, yeah, like, I don't know. Like they've been a bit vague about Johnny Sexton's fitness, so I think a lot will depend on that. Look, it's a hamstring strain as well. I don't think they'll take any chances, particularly for the Italy game. But I think if Johnny Sexton was fit, my sense is that Johnny Sexton would play, and that's certainly not the way I'd be thinking. I actually think this weekend, even if Johnny Sexton was fully fit and playing really well, is a no-brainer to give Joey Carbery back-to-back starts. I think one thing that got overlooked when he did get the start against France a couple of weeks ago was that because Johnny Sexton pulled out so late on the Wednesday evening, Joey Carbery didn't get to lead the team for the week, which is such a huge element of being an out half and being the leader. So when they came into camp last week for a mini two-day camp, it was only 23 players, and on the Friday they went up against the 20s, which is always a feisty session, because the 20s, who are on for a Grand Slam now more than what the senior team are always looking to make an impression. But Johnny Sexton wasn't the one involved in that. It was Joey Carbery. So they'd had their review. Joey Carbery was giving his feedback, and he was going, okay, implement it now against the 20s, who are going to look to smash you. So I think it's an ideal opportunity to go into this week and say to Joey Carbery, yeah, you're our man, you're the man in charge of the jersey. Like Irish rugby speaks so often about, if you're in charge of the jersey, leaving it in a better place and things like that, whereas I think Joey Carbery now is the man in possession of the jersey. I think we can talk about England further down the line, because I think that's a different kettle of fish, and you'll have to take the standard of opposition that awaits this weekend. But if Joey Carbery shoots the lights out this weekend on the back of what I thought played very well in difficult circumstances in Paris, then you've got exactly what you want in terms of Andy Farrell. You've got a difficult selection headache, and it's not maybe as much of a foregone conclusion as what it has been in the last couple of years.
We're getting to an ideal scenario here where there's genuine competition for the place, and what you think would be the right thing to do in the short term and the long term is give Carbery another opportunity. not on the basis that, oh, we're taking a risk here. He played against France, the best team in the competition, and played well. He wasn't amazing, but Johnny Sexton's performance, where he was very good, was against a really weakened Welsh team. Like we were saying, you know, marks out of 10, Sexton gets a higher mark out of 10 than Carberry does, if that's your methodology for measuring this. But the context of like going up against the French, who were trying to smash you, and performing at the level you performed, that's far more, away from home, is far more significant than a routine victory against a Welsh side who put the flag up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I actually think it would be closer if you were going to think about it like that and doing marks out of 10. I'd agree with you, as well as Johnny Sexton played. And I do think it's important to stress that I think the gap is still significant when both players are fully fit. But the problem is, as much as Johnny Sexton picks up injuries, so does Joey Carberry, and that's probably why Ireland are in this situation. You know, I thought it was interesting even that Jack Harty, you know, finished out the game in Paris. It was his first time playing since 2019, and we're still talking about the same things. You know, Jack Harty hasn't had enough game time to come on. And let's say Joey Carberry had pulled up after 50 minutes, had got injured. Like, how are you expecting Jack Harty to come on and play a game to that level when he hasn't played for Ireland since the 2019 World Cup? So we're still in this muddled cycle. We're obsessed with talking about it because it just won't go away. But also, we are talking about Johnny Sexton as one of the greatest players to ever have played the game, let alone one of the greatest Irish players. So anyone who comes in after that, it's a poison chalice, because you're going to be judged at certain standards. But Joey Carberry is not the same kind of out half as Johnny Sexton is. So when he comes in, I think there has to be not alterations to the game plan, but they're different in how they lead, they're different in how they approach. Like, Johnny Sexton came in and basically, you know, grabbed O'Gara's jersey off him. I don't think Joey Carberry has that kind of same ruthless.
Well, he did lose it to him in the World Cup quarter-final as well. Like that, you know, for the Australia game, was it the Australia game? We won it back, and then he didn't see out the competition with it. Like, there's definitely, it wasn't this happened one day, the king is dead, long live the king, and that was it.
Yeah, and it's funny actually, in Paris as well, we've already started to have Johnny Sexton cam, just like we had Rog cam. The cameras panned him a couple of times, and he actually, I was watching it back, it didn't come across on TV, but he got booed roundly the 2 times.
Did he? By the French?
Yeah, right. Absolutely, which was...
I'm surprised they didn't keep going back to him then.
Yeah, so you suddenly now you're having like Johnny Sexton cam, and I've listened to Ronan O'Gara talk about this with you guys actually, and you know, when someone is kind of just looking over your shoulder, a presence and a personality is so big like that, I'd imagine it can be quite difficult. And this is Joey Carberry's challenge now. And that's why I think a week like this, when he's told, you're a man, lead the week, like, don't have it like really vague in his head that, oh, we'll see how Johnny Sexton's hamstring is.
That's exactly it, isn't it?
Back your man.
They can't go back to Sexton for the Italy game. It makes no sense whatsoever. You're taking away that opportunity that you're talking about, but you're also taking away the opportunity to say, you're right there now, go for it.
Mm-hmm. And that's what he's lacking. He hasn't had a chance to build up the confidence because he hasn't been fit enough, and that's the reality of it. I think if Johnny Sexton had been starting in Paris, I don't necessarily think it would have made a big difference to the end result, because I think you could have had Dan Carter in his prime playing in that first half, and it wouldn't have made any difference at all, because Ireland were getting monstered up front. The ruck ball was so slow, and actually Joey Carberry was a big reason why Ireland played their way back into the game, I thought. So if you're going to judge him off that performance, and like, it's Italy as well at the end of the day. Like, I'm sure once the players and coaches are coming out this week, we're going to have to listen to how much of a threat they pose. I had a look there earlier. I think the bookies make it 40 points. Right. Like, we've got to be realistic about what the scale of the challenge is. And even if someone comes in and does play well, I don't think anyone's going to get ahead of themselves either, because unfortunately it is only Italy. Like,
I don't think they should play Furlong in this game either. Really, is there any need for us to see what Tadhg Furlong can do in this game? There's definitely some players who you're thinking in the long run it probably won't make that much difference, but an extra week of rest for the England game might give Tadhg Furlong an extra 2% or an extra 3.5 minutes on the field against England at Twickenham, and that might be the difference between swinging the game and not swinging the game.
Yeah, and you know what, like, we talk about the out half situation so often, and that's kind of what the point of the piece I had in today's paper. I actually think there's a lot of positions in the Ireland squad where there's issues in the depth chart coming behind them. I think tight head is absolutely one of them. I think loose head is one of them. I mean, for 2 props to play 73 minutes in the Stade de France, as impressive as it is, and you know, two like unbelievable players, like incredible fitness, and they were playing really well. That is a worrying sign for me, particularly when you come to a World Cup next year and you're going to be asking these guys, you know, to be playing games every 5 days, and you're talking about a game against Scotland, a game against South Africa, and potentially a World Cup quarter final against France or New Zealand. That is not sustainable to ask a tight head or a loose head to play that long. And you look at France rolling a new front row off the bench after 55 minutes, you know. So there are issues there. I think fullback is another one. I think in the second row, like the fullback one isn't one that's been actually discussed very often because Hugo Keenan has been so good. Since he's made his debut in October 2020, he has played all 17 Ireland games, started every single one of them. I think he's been taken off 3 times, and they've all been kind of after the hour mark late in the game. So as incredible as Hugo Keenan has been, his durability, his level of consistency, so impressive. We don't know who Ireland's backup or fullback is, and that is an issue as well. And my concern is that Andy Farrell is going to play Hugo Keenan again this week, because I think the 23 players who were kept in camp last week, that is where the bulk of the team for this week is going to come from. I think the guys who were released back to their provinces are on the back foot, and Andy Farrell loves Hugo Keenan, and like I said, as good as he's been, you've got to find out now who the backup players are.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, like, who is that guy? Because, like, I mean, it does seem that Lowry is the one that everybody wants to see start, and Italy would be a perfect opportunity. But you do get the feeling that if this was a World Cup quarter final this weekend and Hugo Keenan gets injured, Lowry isn't the next man up. It would be, if Jordan Larmour was fit, it would probably be him or somebody who has played at fullback for Ireland.
And no matter who you threw in there, you'd be seriously concerned, and that is the issue.
Unless it's Conway, I would.
Conway.
We've had this conversation a lot of times, and I'm totally on board with it. But I just don't think it's going to happen at this stage. You know, Jacob Stockdale, if he's fit come the World Cup, is another one who could come back in. I think Will Addison, all things being equal, but you just can't like build your hopes around a guy who's had that many injuries. Joey Carberry went there in November, which I thought was very telling in the Argentina game. When Harry Byrne came on, Joey Carberry went to full back. That was one of the 3 games actually that Hugo Keenan came off in. So I think you're right. Like, this weekend, I think is made for Michael Lowry. You've got to see what this guy is capable of, and he's been one of the best Irish players this season. It's not like he doesn't merit his chance. You're not throwing out caps for the fun of it. This guy has been outstanding this season. I think Jimmy O'Brien is he's highly unlikely to feature this weekend, but he's a very, very interesting addition to the squad as well. So there are a few issues there that I think really now is the time to find out where the next man in is.
That 2-day session, that 23-man squad that you were talking about, who was in it?
The starting team, essentially. I mean, the squad of the bulk of the 23 who played against France would have been in it. So you're talking about all the guys who've played 2 games, particularly who've started 2 games, are in it. They kept, I'd say, the likes of Rob Herring didn't go back to Ulster because Ronan Kelleher is out injured now. So he'll provide cover, you'd imagine, for Dan Sheehan. And I think just, Ger, on your point about Tadhg Furlong, I actually agree in principle with you, but I'm trying to put myself into Andy Farrell's head a little bit. And if you're going, OK, we're going to start Dan Sheehan in his first Six Nations start again, albeit against Italy, you kind of want to see how he'll do with the starting front row, do you know what I mean? So I don't think it's unrealistic to think that Ireland are going to make 15 changes, and if they did, they would still beat Italy well, I think. But I think you want, if you're embedding players within the team, I think you want to see them paired.
I get that. I do get that. I think that James Ryan should definitely play. I'm not sure about Furlong just because he's so important to us, but I can see the case for it. But then you get back to your case of like, do we play Craig Casey? And actually, it would be good to see Craig Casey with Sexton, see what that looks like. And you can make the case on either side. You would just hope that the conservative nature of Irish selection over the last few decades is actually a thing of the past, and it feels like it has been. Like the Mac Hansen selection was a bit left field. You had Tadhg Byrne moving to 6, I think, did you?
Yeah, I just think it would be interesting. I don't think, I'm a massive fan of Jack Conan. I don't think he's been at his best over the first 2 games. He's actually been taken off in both of them as well, and they have gone this way with Caelan Doris at 8. I think Caelan Doris playing 6 at the moment is I don't know how long that's going to last, because in my mind he's the best number 8 in the country. But Jack Conan had the season of his life last year, got on the Lions tour, started all 3 tests, and was one of the few players who actually enhanced his reputation on the tour to South Africa. So I think it would just be interesting. You know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, Ireland being overpowered and stuff, and I don't think you depower it by by putting Ian Henderson into the second row, because that's the one thing that people say, that he's a tight head scrummager, you know, behind Furlong and whatnot. So I think it would be interesting to see that balance, because I think Tadhg Beirne is undroppable at the moment. It's just a question of where he plays, and I think Andy Farrell would be really keen to get Ian Henderson minutes. I think he'll be really keen to get Robbie Henshaw minutes. I asked him last week at the press conference about the issue of, you know, the props playing that long, and, you know, he said it was his call, it was the feel of the game, they were playing really well, but I think the lack of impact that he got off that bench is a big concern as well. I think at the moment, when you look at that bench, particularly in Paris, Ian Henderson and Robbie Henshaw aside, even though there's an argument to be made that if they had been, you know, more games under the belt, they could actually have been starting, but I think there's too many game managers on that bench rather than game changers, and I think that is a big issue. Sorry to use like the Eddie Jones kind of bluster term, but
it's true.
It's very true.
Like it's what O'Gara talks about.
Yeah, you know? And I think, like, you look at that bench and you look at like someone like Peter O'Mahony, you look at Conor Murray, you look at Cian Healy. These guys still have a role to play, and I'm absolutely not downplaying that. But when you had a game that you needed to win, you needed to up the tempo of what was going on. So bringing Conor Murray on just doesn't really work. I think like someone like Craig Casey, I think Gavin Coombs just has to be started to be brought in. He's had a tricky start to the season, but a guy like that, like, he's made for Test rugby. Like, he's unbelievably physical. I think, like I said, he had issues. He got stuck in South Africa. He was one of those players got caught up in COVID and things like that. So I think it would have been interesting if he had been able to build on last season, because it's amazing that no one has really talked about the loss of CJ Stander in Munster, because you have this guy who's coming through, and he's a guy I think who could make a really big impact if he's not starting off the bench, and I think he needs to be brought through as well.
Okay. Is that how you see the bench makeup going over the next little while? That Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray could be struggling to make the squad?
Well, I think it will depend on the game. I think if you're going to Twickenham, I would be shocked if they're not on the bench. Like, I mean, you have this issue of, like, they're centrally contracted players, and that does count for something. That is the flaw within the Irish system. You know, these guys are among the top 15, 16 earners in the country. It's so rare that you see a centrally contracted player who is fit left out of an Ireland 23. And like I said, that is one of the flaws of the system. But if you want people to come on, guys to come on and change a game, I'm just not sure that, like, these type of players are able to do that. I think they can come on and close out a game. I think we're seeing that, like, in someone like Cian Healy, whose best days are behind him now. Like, I mean, 35, he's unbelievable amount of mileage on the clock. He's been through some serious injuries, and it's kind of unfair to compare it to France, because you look at the depth, but you have to compare it to the best teams in the world and what they're doing. And you see how well that French front row played. Like, they're arguably the best front row in the world right now, along with the Springboks, obviously. But they came off after 55. They came off after 55 minutes.
We were banging on. Ireland were banging on about how we had the best front row in the world. And you're like, come on, this is exactly the type of stuff that pisses people off, because we're getting carried away. There's no special prize for it. We're probably third at best.
Yeah, third at best. You have a hooker who's still finding his feet in international rugby. You have a loosehead who's just after switching back to
come on, what were we talking about?
So, yeah, I think it's okay. Like, it's a kind of classic Irish thing. I think it's okay to acknowledge, like, that these guys are sensationally good, but
we're not very excited about them.
Exactly, and there's every reason to be excited about them.
But now what we've done is, like, anytime they're not the best in the world, we said they were the best in the world, they're not. Yeah. They're a disappointment. It's like, no, they're not. They're just learning.
Yeah, and that is the classic kind of Irish, and build them up to kind of knock them down. But there's every reason to be excited. But the issue is who's coming here for it.
It's Gordon Darcy, I think, to put a name on it. And
it was your fault. You were the one that was like, you lulled him into it.
Stephen Kibbs, Pete Green was saying that the Irish front row is the best in the world. I'm just relaying information here.
But all the while, Ireland were winning games last year, predominantly at home. I think, you know, the talk was, it would be great to see how they would go up against the Springboks, because that is the ultimate test. But France right now are very, very close to what the Springboks are in terms of their physicality. Like they had a 6-2 split on the bench. Like that was their version of the bomb squad. You know, so that was a test, and I think Ireland ultimately failed it because they came up short. And I don't think it was down to the starting props. Like I said, getting 73 minutes out of them is remarkable, but you need to see guys like Tom O'Toole, like, you know, he's struggling to get his place in Ulster, but like he's one you'd really like to see push through. And you know, someone like Dave Kilcoyne, like we know what he's capable of, and I think that would be the argument that Andy Farrell would make against the discussion that we're having here. He would say, well, who are the guys that you want me to play, you know? It's not like you can throw... There isn't a whole bunch of young props coming through, and that is an issue. And it's a bigger issue for Irish rugby rather than directly to Andy Farrell, I think.
Yeah, I do wonder if maybe that whole management of the props situation needs to be re-looked at, where we actually send everybody away for a couple of years in their early 20s and see how they get on in England and France, but kind of have some kind of relationship with them. Like, it's obviously not ideal that your first team plays all the big games and your first team provides the first and second choice for the international team as well as for Leinster, so there's not actually enough opportunity for anybody else to come through in that scenario. We're getting better. It definitely is better than it was in previous years, but I think when we were doing our depth charts, Keith Wood made the point that like our second choice tight head is actually our first choice loose head in reality. I know they're not going to change him back in the middle of a game, but maybe they will in the World Cup.
That is the fear, that they actually could. And if it came to a World Cup and, you know, Tadhg Furlong got injured, that is my fear, that they would go to Andrew Porter, whose body size and everything has changed now because he shed down a lot of kilos to go back to loose head to allow him to get around the pitch more. That is my major concern, that they would say to Andrew Porter, okay, we need you to go back, and suddenly Cian Healy is in, and then you don't have this super dynamic front row. Like it's the same in Munster at the moment. Like they have two really exciting tight heads who it feels like have been coming through for so long, and Keenan Knox and Roman Salanoa, but they can't get in ahead of Stephen Archer and John Ryan because their scrummaging is deemed not up to standard at the moment, and that's like a reflection, I think, of the bigger issue in Irish rugby at the moment, that you just don't have a flood of exciting young props. Like Andrew Porter is the last one to come through. When he was playing 20s, you knew it was only a matter of time before this guy was playing international rugby, and you don't get that sense, I think, at the moment with a lot of the guys in the system.
There were growing pains with Porter as well, where the scrum would collapse and he would be getting penalised for it, and it was 2 or 3 times a game. Not every game, but like certainly you just have to bite the bullet and say, we're going to give you 10 games, and at the end of that you're going to be part of the cycle. That doesn't happen if everybody plays 73 minutes, and that's why it'll be interesting to see what happens this weekend. Is your instinct that Andy Farrell picks the team you've picked for him this morning and that Sexton starts?
No, I have a feeling Joey Carberry will start because Johnny Sexton wasn't involved in that session against the 20s, which would have been deemed their big session last week. They were a bit vague, as they always are, on the state of his hamstring. Like I said, it's a hamstring issue. Like, would you really risk that against Italy? You've got England coming up in 2 weeks. I think it's mad that we're having this conversation, to be honest with you. Like, I just think it's a no-brainer to back Joey Carberry this week.
I would agree with that, and I would actually say that you should back him against England as well, because then you get a much better opportunity. It's a 3-game series where you get to see exactly what he's made of in 3 completely different situations and environments. One where he's thrown in, one where he's given the whole week, and one where he's under pressure because Sexton's on the bench against England. It's like, well, now we know a lot about you and whether or not you're totally ready to go or not, but we'll see. All right, are we going to win by 40 points? This is the probably last time we'll talk to you before the game.
I'd be very surprised if Ireland don't, no matter what team, if it's Johnny Sexton or Joey Carberry, I'd be very surprised if they don't put a big score. This Italy team, they're poor and they're also missing some key men in the pack, so I think it'll be a very strong Ireland pack, and I think they'll just monster Italy as pretty much as France did to Ireland in that first half a couple of weeks ago.
Keen, good stuff. The Aviva Prawn Sandwich Brigade is keeping the real fans out, says Dave. Maybe the Prawn Sandwich Brigade are the real fans.
Are there prawn sandwiches at the Aviva?
I'd love if there were, actually, yeah. Well, you wouldn't have full stadiums without them.
It's wine and cheese, isn't it? That's what Adrian Barry's having.
Yeah.